Good evening from Los Angeles. I'm Tavis Smiley. So how does Donald Trump get people to believe whatever he says, even while the media calls out one lie or false statement after another? It turns out that Trump's simple insults and repetitive name-calling actually have a science behind them, and it works. Tonight, then, a conversation with linguist and cognitive scientist George Lakoff about the science of framing and unconscious thought. We're glad you've joined us, George Lakoff, in just a moment. George Lakoff has for years been studying political messaging and how people digest the language of public discourse. He is an author and professor emeritus of cognitive science and linguistics at UC Berkeley. He joins us now to talk about how failing to understand unconscious thought and moral worldviews has frustrated Democrats and progressives as they try to counter the Trump message with basic logic. Professor Lakoff, good to have you on the program.
A pleasure to be here.
Linguistically, size up Donald Trump for me.
Well, it's not just linguistically, it's mentally.
Okay.
He knows how not just to speak, but how to change your brain and to affect your brain very, very effectively. He's a super salesman, and he's very, very good at it. And you need to know a little bit about your brain, which is ideas don't float in the air, they're in your neural circuitry. And if you have a worldview, your understanding of the world in general, then that's a lot of neural circuits. Those neural circuits for a worldview are fixed. Once they're fixed, they become what you might call a neural filter. You can only understand what your brain allows you to understand. So if you have only one worldview, you're stuck to understand things that fit that worldview. And if information comes in that doesn't fit it, it'll be either not noticed, ignored, ridiculed, or attacked.
People choose, though, to have one worldview, do they not?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Very often they're brought up with it. I suspect that Donald Trump was brought up with the worldview he has.
When I say choose, I mean he could expand his worldview if he wanted to.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No, this is not something that you just consciously will. Remember, about 98% of thought is unconscious and beyond conscious control. Now, many people, probably most, have more than one worldview at once. What is a moderate? A moderate is somebody who has mostly one. If you're a moderate conservative, you have some progressive views on various different things. If you're a moderate progressive, you have some conservative views on different things. And that means you have two different worldviews, but about different things. And neurally, that means those two worldviews contradict each other, and the activation of one weakens the other. So if you can use language to activate your worldview in somebody else, you have power.
So tell me then how Trump connects his worldview with his linguistics.
First, repetition.
Right.
Over and over and over. The language means something. It activates what's called a frame in your brain, which is part of a worldview. A good example, when George Bush first came into office, the first day he talked about tax relief, which says that taxation is an affliction, and the good guys try to get rid of that affliction. The bad guys want to keep it there. And then every day after that, he repeated it, until the New York Times started using tax relief on its front page, and the Democrats took tax relief for the middle class and so on, taking the conservative understanding of taxation. And this happens a lot. Take regulation. Trump says he wants to get rid of regulation. What does that mean? From a corporate point of view, a regulation is something that imposes on your freedom, is a burden, and it's costly. But from the point of view of the public, regulations are there to protect you. They're to protect you against unscrupulous corporations in all kinds of ways. And what's happening right now is that the Republicans in Congress are getting rid of regulations in the Food and Drug Administration. For example, regulations on proving that drugs are effective and that they work. 90% of the tests usually shows that most drugs don't work. So if you get rid of those, you get 90% of the drugs out there that are supposed to be healing you, not healing you. They get rid of environmental regulations on clean water, clean air, and things like that, and so on. You get rid of regulations in the SEC. What does that mean? It means fraud is made okay. So what happens is, behind the scenes, regulations are getting rid of, but they're not called protections. If you said, look, Trump has said he's going to get rid of 75% of the government protections in the following areas: food and drug, clean water, clean air. How do you feel about being poisoned? Right? Very different understanding.
Mm-hmm. Is my mind so weak, though, that when I hear Trump say the same thing to me over and over and over again, or tweet the same thing over and over and over again, that I have no ability to resist that? I have no cognitive ability to process that differently?
You have to resist it all the time in order to stop it. But most people don't. So it'll happen over and over. He would say, crooked Hillary, till people thought she was crooked about something when she wasn't. You get the idea of the crooked press, the press that is lying to you, lying press. Well, the press isn't lying. The press is
fake news
all the time,
right,
until people get it as fake news. And most of the population has no choice but about that. Most of the population can't consciously resist all the time.
Why?
Because that's how brains work. If you have language that activates an idea which is physically there in your brain, every time it's activated, it gets stronger. The more it's repeated and activated, the stronger it gets.
So are you telling me then that even though I have a basic, fundamental sense of right and wrong, my mom and daddy raised me that way, if I hear a lie told to me enough times, the lie will overtake the good sense I have about what's right and wrong, what's just in the world?
I don't know about you personally, but with a lot of people, the lying doesn't matter. And let me tell you why.
Wow. Hold up. You got me on that one. So the lie doesn't matter to a lot of people. Why?
Well, look, think of it this way.
Yeah.
All politics is about morality. It's about right and wrong. If a politician says, do what I say, it's because it's right, not because it's wrong. They don't say, do it because it's evil,
right,
or it doesn't matter.
Sure.
So, all right, that means your notion of what's right for you is what's important here. Now, your very identity is defined by what's right for you. You want to think of yourself as doing right all the time. Mm-hmm. That is the deepest part of your identity. It is the highest truth for you. Now, if you have what I'll call strict father morality, which is what Trump has and what the Republicans mainly have, what that says is that view of the world, which is a view having to do with domination, that view of the world defines who you are, and it's the higher truth. So if something comes in and it doesn't fit that, and you happen to know it's a lie, it doesn't matter, because the higher truth that defines your very identity is more important.
Okay, you have completely undermined every belief system I've ever had about the fact that our mind connected to our heart is what drives us. It's the strongest part of who we are. But now you're telling me that my mind is so easily manipulated.
Some people's minds are. Yours may or may not be.
Yeah.
But most people are not consciously looking for what is going on opposing them. And most people don't think about other people's worldviews. One of the things about being a progressive is that you care about other people, and empathize with other people, and you want to know the truth. And if you want to know the truth, you worry about what other people are thinking and whether something is true or not. But if the issue is something very different, if you think of a family life as being a matter of father knows best, he has authority over you and physical authority, he's supposed to have tough love. If his children don't obey him, where he tells them what's right, then they should be punished. They have to be punished. It's his duty to punish them until they, try to avoid the punishment, do what he says, and then if they do that and don't do what just feels good, then they can go out in the world and be prosperous. Well, there's a logic there. If you are not prosperous, then that means you don't have discipline, which means you can't be moral and you deserve your poverty. And that's the view that people who are poor are lazy. Now, that's a very common view in strict father thought. But there's more to it than that. Because in that, there's a view about the world in general. It says this view of the world, the strict father view of the world, is the natural view. If it's natural, if it's the way the world actually functions, there is a hierarchy. It says that the people who have won out are the people who are the best people. And that gives you a hierarchy of who's better than who. So religions have won out, God above man. We're conquering nature, man above nature. Nurture is there for us to get whatever we can. The strong above the weak. You know, you have to have a strong country, etc., if you're going to beat out other countries. The rich above the poor. Well, they're disciplined, they deserve it. Employers above employees. Well, they're rich enough to be employers. You have Western culture above non-Western culture. Adults above children. In 21 states, teachers and coaches can beat children with sticks if they don't just show them respect all the time. You have America above other countries. America first, because we're better. You have men above women, whites above non-whites, Christians above non-Christians, straights above gays. That is that moral hierarchy, because it says who is won out. Now, that moral hierarchy defines virtually all radical Republican positions on every issue. It's one issue. It's not whether someone is homophobic, or not whether someone is a racist or a sexist or Islamophobic. It's all of them together. They fit together seamlessly. That is what is behind the kind of America and the Americans who voted for Trump. And it's a very powerful kind of thing.
If I take everything that you've just said, I could take that to mean, because let me just back up. You gave a wonderful and powerful and poignant definition of what it means to be a progressive, at least as I see my progressivism.
Right.
Okay. But if I take what you offered as a definition to the nth degree, it sounds to me that progressive should be less caring and more caustic. In other words, if we want to win, if we want to defeat Donald Trump, then we should take on more of his ways. But that's not the kind of people we want to be.
No, absolutely not.
So what do we do then?
Here's what you do.
Okay.
Well, first of all, it's important to understand that there are different kinds of conservatives. There are some who are moderate, that is, who happen to have some progressive views on something or other. There are some who have what I'll call in-group nurturance, in-group care, who care about their families or their neighbors, or in their members of their church, in the Army, the members of their platoon. They care about certain people, and it could be their community, their neighbors, a larger community. Now, so these are, it's important to see this, and I've experienced, I grew up around such folks. When it comes to, if you're being in your in-group, they take care of you. If there's a forest fire, they're out there manning, the hoses. If there's a flood, they're swinging the sandbags. They may have political views that are very different, but when it comes to care in their community and care for their neighbors, they're right there, and that's real care. And that is where you can discuss things with them and appreciate who they are. So when I was teaching this stuff, students would come to me and say, Thanksgiving is coming. I'm going to encounter my grandfather. We're going to have that grand fight again. I hate it. I can't stand the very idea of it. And I say, don't fight with your grandfather. Your grandfather loves you. Tell you what, ask your grandfather one question. What is he most proud of that he's done for other people without consideration for himself? Ask that question. 100% of the time, people will come back and say, my grandfather has done 3 really terrific things. I disagree with him on other things, but I have to say he's done some really good things for some people. And I say, only talk to him about those things and keep talking to him about what it means for him. Because what that does is activate care and nurturance in his brain.
So that works, this is getting fascinating, I love this. So that works, Professor, if you're talking to a neighbor
right,
who otherwise is a caring person.
Right.
That's different than talking to politicians who are pushing a particular partisan agenda.
Absolutely.
So I'm all for trying to find common ground, but that assumes that they're interested in finding common ground versus pushing this agenda down my throat.
They are not interested in finding common ground, so there are many things you have to do depending on who you are. I'm involved in starting a citizens communication network to get people to think and say protection instead of regulation. Don't say regulation, say these are protections, and so on. There are hundreds of things like that. Always shift the viewpoint to the public. For example, public resources that go through the government are